Do you have a favorite professor, and why do you like their classes?
Yes, my favorite professor is Dr. Kim, who teaches biology. She explains complex topics in a simple way and always encourages questions. Her lectures are interactive and often include real-life examples, which makes learning more interesting. I also like her sense of humor. It keeps the class lively and engaging. Overall, her teaching style motivates me to participate and understand the material deeply. First, you need to understand what the question is asking. In this case, there are two parts: whether you have a favorite professor and why you like their classes. So a strong response must clearly address both points by naming a professor and giving specific reasons. Next, let's examine how a good sample response is structured. To begin with, the speaker gives a direct answer. Yes, my favorite professor is Dr. Kim, who teaches biology. This works well because it clearly answers the first question and adds a helpful detail. Then, the speaker provides reasons. For example, they say she explains complex topics in a simple way and encourages questions. These are strong academic reasons because they show effective teaching and a supportive environment. After that, the speaker describes the class style, mentioning that lectures are interactive and include real-life examples, which makes learning more interesting. Notice that the speaker explains the effect, not just the features. The speaker also adds a personal reason, such as the professor's sense of humor, which makes the class more engaging. Finally, the response ends with a conclusion, saying that her teaching style motivates deeper understanding.
What's the most memorable lesson you learned from them?
The most memorable lesson was about cell regeneration. Dr. Kim explained it with a live demonstration and showed how it applies to medical research. Seeing science in action helped me remember the concepts better and sparked my interest in pursuing more research projects. First, we need to understand what the question is really asking. The interviewer is not asking for general information about the course, but for one specific lesson that stands out in your memory. Therefore, your response should focus on a single example and clearly explain why it was memorable. Next, let's break down how a strong sample response is organized so you can produce a similar answer. To begin with, the speaker directly identifies the lesson. The most memorable lesson was about cell regeneration. This is important because effective TOEFL responses start with a clear and specific statement. Instead of giving a broad description of biology or the course in general, the speaker immediately focuses on one particular topic. This helps provide clarity and direction from the very beginning. After that, the speaker explains how the lesson was taught. Dr. Kim explained it with a live demonstration. This detail is crucial. High-scoring TOEFL responses often include not only what was taught, but also how it was taught. By mentioning a live demonstration, the speaker shows that the lesson was visual and interactive, which makes it easier to remember. Then, the speaker adds another important point, and showed how it applies to medical research. Here, the response connects classroom learning to real-world application. This is an essential TOEFL strategy because it demonstrates that the speaker understands the practical relevance of the lesson, not just the theory. Next, the speaker explains the personal effect. Seeing science in action helped me remember the concepts better. This is important because strong TOEFL responses do not only describe events, they also explain how those events influence the speaker's understanding or experience. Finally, the speaker provides a longer-term outcome and sparked my interest in pursuing more research projects. This is a strong closing idea because it shows motivation and future direction. Ending with this type of statement makes the response more complete, meaningful, and well-developed.
How has this professor influenced your learning style?
She encouraged me to take notes actively, ask questions, and connect theory with practice. This changed my learning style from passive listening to active engagement, improving my understanding and retention of academic material. First, we need to understand what the question is really asking. The interviewer is not simply asking you to describe a professor or a lesson. Instead, the focus is on how the professor changed the way you study or learn. In other words, your answer should explain a clear before and after shift in your learning behavior. Next, let's break down how a strong sample response is constructed so you can produce a similar answer. To begin with, the speaker immediately describes specific actions influenced by the professor. She encouraged me to take notes actively, ask questions, and connect theory with practice. This is important because effective TOEFL responses should start with concrete behaviors rather than vague statements. Instead of saying something general like, "She helped me learn better," the speaker clearly lists 3 specific actions: active note-taking, asking questions, and connecting theory with practice. These details are strong because they are clear, practical, and easy to visualize. After that, the speaker highlights the key element of transformation. This changed my learning style from passive listening to active engagement. This is the core of the response. High-scoring TOEFL answers often show a contrast between 2 states. In this case, the speaker compares the before state, passive listening, with the after state, active engagement. This contrast makes the professor's influence much more clear and meaningful. Finally, the speaker explains the result of this change: improving my understanding and retention of academic material. This part is essential because TOEFL responses should always include impact. It answers the important question of "so what?" The speaker shows that the new learning style is not just different, but also more effective in improving understanding and long-term memory of the material.
If you could suggest one improvement for their class, what would it be?
I'd suggest more small group activities for discussion. This would allow students to share ideas, collaborate, and learn from each other, while still enjoying Dr. Kim's interactive teaching style. First, we need to understand what the question is asking. This is not about praising the professor, but about giving one realistic suggestion for improvement. In other words, the key requirement is balance. Your response should be polite, constructive, and still connected to the professor's teaching style. Next, let's break down how a strong sample response is constructed so you can produce a similar answer. To begin with, the speaker gives a clear and direct suggestion. I'd suggest more small group activities for discussion. This is important because effective TOEFL responses should be specific and immediate. Instead of using vague ideas such as "make the class better," the speaker focuses on one concrete improvement, adding small group discussions. After that, the speaker explains why this improvement would be helpful. This would allow students to share ideas, collaborate, and learn from each other. Here, the response expands the suggestion by providing clear benefits. The structure is effective. One specific idea is introduced first, followed by multiple supporting effects. This is a strong TOEFL strategy because it develops the answer without changing the main topic. These benefits are also student-centered, including sharing ideas, collaborating, and learning from peers. This is important because it highlights active learning, which is often valued in TOEFL speaking responses. Finally, the speaker adds balance by connecting the suggestion back to the professor's strengths, while still enjoying Dr. Kim's interactive teaching style. This is a key technique because it prevents the response from sounding negative. Instead of criticizing the professor, the speaker shows that the suggested improvement fits naturally with the existing teaching style, making the answer both respectful and well-balanced.